Go ahead. Good morning. We're so happy to see you all this morning. How many have been gaining a blessing at this camp meeting? You know, when I think of what's happening here, it's explosive. The ability of the speakers to be free, to be able to share what God has put on our hearts from every last one. You were here at the morning manna this morning. From some of us that are younger and some of us that have acquired more experience. But God is using this camp meeting to share a truth that's not new. It's old, but it's something new because we haven't heard it for a while. Isn't that what Jesus told his disciples? And we need to grasp the fact that God is still above the distractions of the earth. And all things are open to his divine survey, and from his great and calm eternity, he orders that which his providence sees best. If there was ever a time we needed to pray and to be in harmony with the light and the channels that God is going to use to give light to us, it's now. And I believe, as I've been just associated with this ministry just in this last little while, I've just come to my knowledge less than a year now, I believe that God is using this ministry in a special way. And that we need to support them, we need to pray for them, and whether it's radical or not, however you wanted to interpret it, we're hearing the voice of God. Because this, if you would have heard James White speak, or Elder Haskell, or Brother Bates, some of these men, you would have heard stirring messages. And there was no hold back. They believed that Jesus was coming way back years ago, over 150 years ago, and they preached like they believed it. And if we're going to be successful, we're going to take up the steps. Yesterday morning I talked in the morning manna, I shared the statement from Volume 5 where I seldom weep, she says, page 77. But now she was weeping, and the reason she was weeping, she saw what the educational system had done to the preachers of the hour. And her big burden was when those who had not been affected by the education, but those were the burden bearers of the hour, when they left off the scene, who would fill their places? And that was a very, very strong burden on her heart, so much so that she says, I seldom weep, but now I find my tears dropping on my page. And listen, we ought to be in the same state today. We need to pray that God will raise up men that understand this message, and it'll put it forth in the spirit and the power of Elijah. What do you say? So with that in mind, let us just kneel as we begin our meeting this morning. Our Father in heaven, there's nothing in our hands we bring, it's simply to the cross we cling. We present before heaven the righteousness of Jesus, which comes before thee as a sweet-smelling Savior. And we're asking, dear Lord, that the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Godhead, who is as much a person as anyone walking these grounds, we pray that he will be here, that our hearts will be converted, be touched and convicted and compelled. So bless as your word is open, that we might understand your will, how to do evangelism both in our homes, in the church, and in the world. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. I want to ask the question before I begin. How many are here for the first time that were not here yesterday in class? We have some first times. I'll recap just a few things, what we did yesterday, so we can carry on. Our first text is in Isaiah 50 and verse 4. Isaiah 50 and verse 4. There we see a principle that when it comes to working with our homes, with the church, or outside, it applies. This principle applies all the way around. And it reads like this. Isaiah 50 and verse 4 says, The Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season. To him that is weary, he wakeneth morning by morning, and he waketh mine ear to hear as to learn. We see some principles here that we want to look at, because when we're doing, as I said, in our home, in the church, because one of the questions that I have, I was pastoring for several years, and I became converted as a Seventh-day Adventist in a logging camp in British Columbia, Canada, 45 years ago. Almost 46 now. But it took it wasn't very long. My first wife left me because of the fact that I had known nothing about Adventism, and she knew nothing about Adventism when we got married. And we were living a life of, we were going to be rich in houses and lands, and we were already headed that way. At the age of 22, I had several pieces of property. We were working on getting into the building trade so that we wanted to be rich and famous. Not famous in the sense of Hollywood, but we just want to be rich and noticed. My ex-father-in-law was a builder, and so he was going to obviously assist us. But when I became a Christian, all of that went sour. We had new direction in that life now, and I didn't know where my life would go, but I knew this for sure, that whatever God said I wanted to do. In the simplicity of that, at 22 years old, I didn't have, and the next few years that I was in the church, for the next 3 years, I had never read one Spirit of Prophecy book. I was going to the Seventh-day Adventist church and never read one Spirit of Prophecy book. Now, I don't know if it was because I was dull of hearing, whether it was presented or not. I don't know. I just was in that stage where I didn't do it. But anyway, my wife left me, my first wife left me, and shortly after that, I wound up as a student in a self-supporting school in Eden Valley, Loveland, Colorado. Wayne Dull was the president there, and I was there in a very short time. I knew that God had called me that place. I didn't just accidentally get there. And I started to learn some lessons. Now, I mentioned yesterday that I became an Adventist later on in life. I wasn't in the church. I only been to church about 5 times in my life, to a Sunday school, and so I knew very little. But I was born in a home that was, we were very poor. My mother, or my stepfather, not my daughter, had never hugged or kissed me or told me that I was worth anything for the first 15 years of my life. And I left home at 15, a rebellious child. Absolutely, I fought authority. I went against anything that I was always very self-defensive. I wanted to defend it because there was nothing left of me. It had been beat up all the time, and I wanted to defend myself. And so you can imagine you wouldn't want to be around me and say something I didn't like, because I would let you know about it. And out of that, and after that, I became converted in a logging camp at 22 years old. Not 72. I haven't reached 70 yet. I'm looking for page 72 of the book. Early writings here. Get the wrong horse before the court here. But anyway, when I got to Eden Valley, and remember, I was heading to make money. I was heading because I didn't want to be poor anymore. Lots of times in our home, we had nothing to eat. Listen carefully. We had nothing to eat but flour and boiled water. I mean, flour boiled in water. I'll get this straight yet. It takes me a minute. And we were embarrassed in school. I used to wear my shirts inside out because they were so dirty, and we had no water to wash our clothes. And I stank. You could smell me before you could see me. And I was very embarrassed as a child. And I grew up with all of this business, and I was bound and bent that I would never be poor again. And that's one of the reasons that I realized that work would get me out of this situation. So when I left home, I started working in a logging camp at 16 years old with grown men. And you grow up fast when you go to a logging camp. If you haven't grown up, you will grow up fast with working with men that are hard people. Many of them were very hard. And so in that situation, I grew up, and it only added to the perplexities and the rebellion that was already in my heart. But when I went to Eden Valley, and there I bought all the books that I could at that time of the Spirit of Prophecy. And this is one of the original books I bought, the Desire of Ages I bought. And I like it the best. You know why? It's become my friend, even though there's pages missing, and I've had several other Desire of Ages, but I like this one best. They made better books back then. I've wore out other Desire of Ages since then. They open them up and they fall off, and you don't get them home from the ABC, but these ones lasted. But in this, now with that setting, listen to this statement. I was never going to be poor again, right? Okay, listen to what it says. in 72, it says, temptation, poverty, adversity is the very discipline needed to develop purity and firmness. Not riches. It didn't say riches. See what it said again? Listen to what it says. It says, temptation. If you're going to develop purity, you must have what? You have to have temptation. You can't be pure without it. Was Joseph tempted? Did he come off pure? Yes. Was David tempted? Did he come off pure? No, he didn't. He made a terrible, terrible mistake. So he had to be tempted again because he had to cross that bridge, though. But this says temptation and poverty. Now, what's poverty? I had come out of poverty and I was not going back in. I can remember one time when I went to school, I had about 2 pairs of pants, one for school and one for at home. And I can remember, I didn't even know what shorts was until I left home. And I can remember looking at my pants one time, and the back part of the pants here that cover the buttocks, I could see my hand through there, so I knew what the children were looking at when I was walking around, see. And I tell you, folks, I was embarrassed. And I didn't want to go to the school of poverty again, but this says temptation and poverty. And adversity is the very discipline needed to develop purity and firmness. You see this, page 72. I'll give you another one on page 151, I believe it is, in education. Some of these things come as I speak. I'm not prepared speaker as these professionals are that you deal with here today and last night. I like these presentations on the screen, don't you? Yes, you get to see it. But I haven't developed that. You know, I bought a smartphone the other day and it was too smart for me, so I took it back. I want one of the, I just like to read it, you know. And what I've done with reading, when I was a pastor and I would have prayer meeting, I would make everybody read when we went to prayer meeting. You know, some of them could not read. By the time we got finished with them in prayer meeting, and I'd help them. They'd say, no, I'd say, this is how it sounds, and this is how we pronounce it. And we were patient with them, and we taught people to read right in our prayer meeting. And then we could use them in the front, you know. Listen to what this one says. It says, all, how many? All who in this world render true service to God. If you want to be faithful to God now, true service. Or man receive a preparatory training in the school of sorrow. You want to go to school of sorrow? Well, I don't want to go. I thought I had enough. As I was beaten by my stepfather. First thing I remember in my life, I was 2 years old. My stepfather had me by the hair like this, and his other hand was that far from my face. I'd been through a lot of sorrow, I thought. And then when my first wife left me, it was more sorrow, and I thought, well, I went through enough. But this says, listen carefully. All who are in this world render true service to God, or man receive a preparatory training in the school of sorrow. You know, and we're going to read later on in Ministry of Healing. Why are all these things happening to us when we become Christians, right? These are the schools we have to go through, folks. And we're going to be able to help others when we went through the school. If you haven't went through the school of sorrow, you're not going to help anybody. This goes on. The weightier the trust. To be a Christian is a trust that we've been given, folks. And to have any leadership in God's church is an amazing trust. To be a speaker for the cause of God is a trust that you will not desire. If you have anything about you at all, you should never desire to be a speaker for God. Unless God gives you that burden, don't stand before the people of God. Don't do it. The words that come off our mouth, we're going to be held accountable for. And if we preach some of this foolishness that's coming off the pulpit, you know, the testimonies tells us that there's going to be heresy come off our pulpits. Damnable heresy. And we better know the difference. And one of the reasons is because many of those people that are in our pulpits, they were never called to the ministry. They were pushed into the ministry. It's a nice job. You get paid. Everybody likes you. That's no reason to be in the ministry. None. You better know you're called. This goes on to say, the weightier the trust, the higher the service, the closer is the test, and the more severe the discipline. That's the school we're going to go to. And you know where the finishing touch of that school is? Can somebody tell me? We got Adventists here this morning? Do you read the books? What's the finishing touch to that experience? Someone else try it. Somebody said it. The time of trouble. Time of Jacob's trouble. That's the finishing touch of it. That's where earthliness is finally totally consumed from us. In fact, I brought the book along. I believe I did. Our High Calling. Let's see if I can find it. I think it's 321. It's amazing. Excuse me. Yeah. Amazing. Let's see if I can find this statement on a time of trouble. 321. Listen to what it says. By the way, this is not the class. We're just getting started here. We're just kind of warming up a bit. 321 is the book Our High Calling. It's a morning devotional. It's amazing things in this. Look what it says. The path to freedom from sin is through crucifixion of self and conflict with the powers of darkness. That's the path to freedom. Crucifixion of what? Self. And conflict with the powers of darkness. See, the minute, it says in Revelation 12:17, and the dragon was wroth. What's wroth mean? He's angry with the woman and went to make war. When you become a Christian, this brother shared his testimony with me this morning on our morning walk after breakfast. And to hear how every one of us has a special testimony. And he has a burden to bear because of his past life. He has a cross to bear, but as soon as you become a Christian, that's what happens. We now have a cross to bear. And it's going to take self-discipline because the devil is going to try to destroy you. He doesn't want you in this army. He wants you in his army. And especially some of us that were his particular agents, like I was his particular agent. There's no question that many times in my life, I was totally devil-possessed. I wound up in jail because I had been devil-possessed. Dear ones, when you leave that, you're a special agent, you're causing a ruckus. He likes that. And now if you take it off and you join the other side, he knows that energy is going to be used for Jesus. And so he's going to try to take that away from you. And so life becomes, I used to think when I was a little boy, I remember one time it was very cold outside, and I went out and dug a hole in the ice to get water for the house, because that's how we got water. And I remember looking up at the stars and saying, I knew nothing. I remember I'd been to Sunday school about 5 times in my life. I knew nothing, but for whatever reason, I knew there was a God. And I knew he was holding them stars up. And I said, Lord, and I sensed the call of God early in life. Just through the air, because there was no reading and nobody was preaching. But I sensed God talking to me. And one of the things I sensed God telling me was that I need to give my heart to him. And we're talking when I was just a little boy. And I said, God, but I don't want you to come because I want to enjoy life before you come. I want to have excitement. The most excitement you can have is to join the Adventist church. And it gets exciting. Listen to this. Yeah, especially now, amen. All right, where was I? Let none be discouraged in view of the severe trials to be met in the time of Jacob's trouble, which is yet before them. They are to work earnestly, anxiously, not for that time, but for today. The trials you have today, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Isn't that what Jesus said? Yes. What we want is to have a knowledge of the truth as it is in Christ now, and as a personal experience now. In these precious closing hours of probation, we're in what hours? Closing hours. We have a deep and living experience to gain. We do it now, before the close of probation, as was mentioned yesterday. We shall thus form characters that will ensure our deliverance in the time of trouble. If we haven't understood conflict now, we understand how to meet the devil now, we'll not make it during the time of trouble. That's what this is telling me. Now this is what goes on to say. The time of trouble is the crucible that is to bring out Christ-like characters. Did you get that? The time of trouble is the crucible that is to bring out Christ-like characters. Remember, it's in a crisis that what's revealed? Character is revealed. Well, this is a crisis, isn't it? Yes. Okay, in the time of trouble is the crucible that is to bring out Christ-like character. That's the time of trouble now. Watch what it's going to do that nothing else can do in your experience between now and then. Listen. It is designed to lead the people of God to renounce Satan and his temptations. Did you hear what I just read? I thought that was all over with. We already have the seal of God, don't we? We read last night. We listened to Brother Mason's presentation last night, and if you would read that, did we all read the handout, by the way? We don't have many hours to get it all in. There's a lot of good material in. I read it. Listen. We're sealed. After the National Sunday Law, we're sealed. That's it, isn't it? Well, what is this talking about then? Watch what it says. The time of trouble. It is designed to lead the people to renounce Satan and his temptations. Now, it's not saying we're sinning, and there's a difference here. Before the National Sunday Law, we learned yesterday that we have to have stopped sinning in thought, deed, word, or action. That has to have been stopped. Otherwise, those who have yielded step by step to worldly demands will not find it a hard matter to yield to the powers that be when these things happen. Because we haven't fought temptation. We just haven't pushed back. When the standards were lowered, we lowered ourselves with them. We didn't do anything we could to stand up for truth. So we're awash when the issues come. But this is all after all of that. It says, listen to what it says. It says, the last conflict. Now we're talking about the close of probation. We're talking about now the time of Jacob's trouble. And it says, the last conflict will reveal Satan to them in his true character, that of a cruel tyrant. And it will do for them what nothing else could do. Uproot him entirely from their affections. And when is that? In the time of trouble. If you were to take the time, we're not going to take the time yet because we're going to start a class here for a minute, if I can get started here. We're going to take that and read the chapter in the Desire of Ages called It Is Finished. There's a whole chapter on that. And there's amazing what the understanding of the angels, the good angels that were watching it. You know, as Jesus, or as the angels would go back and forth to the earth, Satan would stop them coming down. Who are you going to see today? I'm going to go see Brother Holland. Did you know Brother Holland was this and he's that and everything, and we just had him do that the other day for us. I got Brother Holland on a string. I can do whatever I want. And the angels would actually stop and listen. But after the cross, the angels didn't listen anymore. It took all those years to get the angels to figure out how bad the devil was. Are you hearing me? Now this time of trouble is going to do the same for us. It's going to uproot him entirely from our affections. We're going to say, he is a devil and we don't want to have anything. We're not stopping and listening to him anymore. So back to the statement in Desire of Ages, temptation, poverty, and adversity is the very discipline needed to develop purity and firmness. Let's get in God's program. What do you say? And if he calls you to a work where there's no money, there's all work and no play, and you're sweating, and you say, what am I doing here? Think of this statement back here. All right? All right, now let's get back to our class. That was just the appetizer, and I'm not charging for that part. This one now? 72. Our age is 72. But also read the chapter, It Is Finished, because listen, it goes on to say in that chapter that not until the conflict is finished will the angels fully understand. They're still trying to solve this problem in their mind. They've made up their mind that Satan is wrong and they're not listening to him anymore, but they still haven't got all the elements in this controversy. So if you feel sometimes you don't understand, don't feel bad. This is a big problem we're dealing with. It's serious. It's taken God 6,000 years to deal with this problem. And God can just speak and there's a world 25,000 miles around, 8,000 miles through. But solving the sin problem wasn't that easy. See, the problem with the elements, God can set a tree to grow, and you know what a tree does? It grows because it has no other choice. But if God tells us to go, sometimes we don't go. Why? Because we have a choice. And sometimes we say, us little puny little things, say no to the God of heaven. So it's taken a while to get through to us. So back to Isaiah 50, verse 4. And so we're going to have to learn this so we can learn how to work with people, both in our home, in the church, and in the outside world. The Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to them that is weary. Now, when he says, gives me the tongue of the learned, how much learning is necessary? Well, it just depends. You'll remember the two demoniacs when Jesus healed them, and then Jesus got back in the boat and he was going to go back, that they wanted to go with Jesus. They wanted more training. You know what Jesus told them? No, you go back and you tell them what I've already done for you. You were maniacs and now you're sane. Now, were these guys the average men? When the disciples saw them, what did they do? They ran. They said, we're out of here. And listen, these were fishermen, Peter and John and James. John and James were called the sons of thunder. I would have had a great time meeting those guys in my prime and them in their prime. There would have been blood on the streets. And Peter was no different. Listen, Peter solved his problem with his sword. You think isn't that what he actually did that in the Garden of Gethsemane, didn't he? We weren't dealing with puny little people here. We're dealing with people that had wills and had determination to follow their wills through. And yet, when these men saw these demon-possessed men, they ran. There comes a time when we had to run, and that's what Peter says. We're getting out of here. But Jesus didn't run. He had the situation totally under control. And so he heals these men. And then he sends them off. So the tongue of the learned, in this case, listen carefully, he told what they could say, listen, we were those guys. We were in chains. Remember, they cut themselves, and they were a mess to look at. So they probably went home, took all the chains off, cleaned up a bit, and then went telling their folks and whoever else, look what God did for me. Amazing story. But that's all they had, so they used what they had. There's others that God wants, as we're going to see in Luke here before too long. But we need to have an intelligent faith. So that's part of the tongue of the learned. By the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to those that are weary. Now, how do we give the truth? We must know how to give the truth. We must know when to give the truth. And we must know, that's why it says, to those that are weary. Sometimes we go out and we'll hand out tracts. And this one you can tell he doesn't want the tract, and he won't even take it. Another one will take it, throw it in the garbage. Others will take it and put it in their pockets and never intending to read it. And others will, somewhere along, will read that tract. What those three positions, where did he fit in? He's weary. He's ready. Okay. And so we cast the word on the waters, and we're looking for the ones that are ready. Okay. And so hand out tracts, hand out these kind of things, talk to whoever. But you're not. You don't condemn the ones that don't take it. Don't condemn the ones that throw it away. Well, now you'll burn in hell because you threw God's word away. He's not ready for God's word. He's just not ready. Be kind to him and love him, but he's not ready. Look for the ones that are ready. That's where we want to spend our time. Now, along with that, we're going to go to Luke now, the 24th chapter of Luke. Luke, the 24th chapter, and we want to look at another principle here. And particularly in this day and age, when we're considering what's preached in the church and out of the church. It's amazing what's happening and the types of evangelism that are being done. We're going to start on verse 13 of chapter 24. It says, "And behold, two of them that went that same day to the village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 80 furlongs, And they talked together of all these things that had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together, they reasoned. Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he said unto them, What manner of communications are these that ye have to one another, as ye walk and are sad? They're in a mess. Jesus had been crucified. Their hope was dashed. They had no future, no vision. As far as they were concerned, everything had come to an end. And they were expressing it both in their countenance and in their words. And one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answering said unto them, Art thou only a stranger, or thou in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things which came to pass in these days? Now, was he a stranger? Did he know what had come to pass? Listen, he knew what had come to pass a whole lot more than they did. And so when he has the tongue of the learned, and he knows how to work with these people now. When he's sharing the Word of God, now he could have said to them, I am Jesus, but for whatever reason we're going to see in a minute, he didn't expose that to begin with. And by the way, Ellen White tells us in the book of Evangelism that there's so much prejudice against the Seventh-day Adventist church that we need to be careful. Now, if we're asked directly at the door, or we're asked directly if we're a Seventh-day Adventist, we proudly say, yes, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. But she says, especially when we're holding our meetings, to hold our name back until we have won the confidence of the people. It's in Evangelism, and if you give me a minute right after, I'll share it. I have it there, but I can't. That one's not on top of my head, but it's there. I think it's 206, but it might be 210. It's right in that area. And so we need to be careful with it, because someone will boastfully say that we've told them now, they've rejected Adventism, we're out of here. Well, why have they rejected Adventism? They've been taught against Adventism, and so we need to break those barriers down. See? And when it comes time, that's why we're told to rent when we start evangelistic meetings. Don't do it at the church. Rent halls away from the church. Now, that isn't in every case. Some places you have no choice, so you do what you can. But this is the reason for that, because that's the tongue of the learned. We would learn how to understandingly work with people, all right? So now, here's Jesus. And he understands that term, doesn't he? And verse 19, and he said unto him, What things? Now, he wasn't trying to make a fool out of them. He wants them to think. All right? And they said unto him, Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death, and have crucified him. But we, he said, that's what the leaders of the church did. But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. Now watch this. What did they trust? He redeemed Israel. Was Israel to be redeemed right then? Now wait a minute before you answer that. Not in the way they thought. He was going to redeem them, because you remember the 490-year prophecy in the book of Daniel. They were to be led free, not necessarily from under the Roman yoke, but free from sin. Remember, iniquity was supposed to cease in 490 years, was it not? Yeah. But because they were still living in sin, they didn't have the discernment to know who Jesus was. Now let's go further. We trusted that it had been he. And beside all of this, today is the third day since these things were done. Now let's go all the way down to verse 25. Then Jesus said unto them, O fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. What were they supposed to believe? All. Now yesterday we talked about rightly dividing the word of truth. Remember when Jesus was in the synagogue in Luke chapter 4, It was given him the scroll, and he read down, but he didn't read the full context. Remember, he stopped. He handed back the book. He stopped and said, "That's enough for today." And then after that setup was finished, when he said, "These very words were filled in your sight, I'm the one that's doing that." Remember, they took him out and they were going to try to kill him. Because the day of vengeance hadn't come at that time. And that's what the disciples were referring back to. They said, "We trusted him. He's going to bring out his swords, and we're going to kill all the Romans, and we're going to have freedom like we did in the days of Solomon." But that isn't what God was telling them. So he said to them, "O fools, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken." If they were going to be real evangelists, they needed to know what? All the Word of God, not just part of it. Now, there was a time when like I said, to the two demoniacs, they told what they had. But he's not dealing with the demoniacs now. He's dealing with the future leaders of the church here. And he wants them to understand so that their testimony will be based totally on the Word of God, not on his personal experience. Let's read it. "All that the prophets have spoken, and ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory?" So he's revealing truth to them. What you just said, you have no faith. We trusted it was him. He died on us. Our leader's finished now. We don't know. He said, wasn't Jesus supposed to die for like this? Wasn't he supposed to suffer these things? So he's opening up their minds now to help them to understand where they had messed up in their understanding of the Scripture. And by the way, we need some people to help us to do that now, don't we? You know, that's coming in among the Seventh-day Adventist church right now is we're not the remnant church. And we need to be careful. I've had church members come to me and say, "Pastor, you need to be careful in saying we're the remnant church." And I said, the next time I'm up there, I'm going to say it a little bit louder because obviously you didn't hear it right the first time. We are the remnant church. If we're the students of prophecy, we are the remnant church. This church came out on time. It had the bitter and the sweet and the bitter experience. It was told to prophesy, and it was given the message to prophesy, and it was told us an understanding of the great controversy that nobody else in the world has. We are the remnant church, and we have all those features to back us up. Don't back down from anybody, because the Word of God tells us that. What do you say? Don't let me get started on that. I'm supposed to be teaching and not preaching, so let's go on. "And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the Scriptures the things concerning himself." They had studied the Scriptures and they hadn't saw Christ in their teaching. That's what he's saying. Now we're going to go to the book, The Great Controversy. You all heard of that book, right? We're going to look at some things in the book called The Great Controversy. What's it called? The Great Controversy. Not only a controversy, but a great controversy. We're going to go to page 349. Now, by the way, what was I supposed to start with today? You all remember that? What was I told you what book we were going to start with? 190. This lady is a student. Great. She did good yesterday, and she's doing better today. Listen. But I'm going there. Hopefully right after this statement, if something else comes up. But listen to this statement now in reference to what we just read in Luke. Great Controversy 349. Now I have 339, and so it's not going to work. So I need to get to 349. Listen to this statement. After his resurrection, Jesus appeared to the disciples on the way to Emmaus, and beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the Scriptures the things concerning himself. The hearts of the disciples were stirred. Faith was kindled. They were begotten again unto a lively hope, even before Jesus revealed himself to them. It was, now listen to this sentence. It's an amazing sentence. It was his purpose to enlighten their understanding and to fasten their faith upon the sure word of prophecy. Did you get that? What was he trying to do? Giving them an unshakable faith that would be built on prophecy. John 14:29 says, "I've told you before it comes to pass, so that when it comes to pass, you might believe." You know, the one thing that God has never given man, and we're trying it, We have Jean Dixon and a whole bunch of people trying it. I don't know, is she even living anymore? I think she's dead. But you know who Jean Dixon was? Yes. And we have fortune tellers on all the corners there in New York City where I was from, where I worked, I mean. God has never given man the ability to tell the future. He's never given man that ability. Isaiah said, produce your cause, saith the Lord. Tell me what's going to happen. And I'll tell you what is going to happen. We'll see which one comes to pass. God has given us prophecy so we might know what God says about the future. Man doesn't know about the future. And you and I, as Seventh-day Adventists, if we've read the last book in the Bible, which is the book of Revelation, and we read along with it the great book called The Great Controversy, we know what the future is. And if you don't, you haven't read the books, because it's all there. There's nothing missing. And so it says he wished. This is what Jesus did. He wished, it said, truth to take firm root in their minds, not merely because it was supported by his personal testimony, but because of the unquestionable evidence presented by the symbols and shadows of the typical law and by the prophecies of the Old Testament. Unquestionable. Let's go to the book of Daniel for a minute. We saw the great image there, right? Daniel chapter 2. The great image. Without turning to it, you're Adventist now. You already know where the book of Daniel is, and you should know what chapter 2 is about. And we're going to get into it a little bit tomorrow. We're going to go into why the book of Daniel was written. But listen to me. Who was the head of gold? Babylon, all right? Daniel said to King Nebuchadnezzar, thou art this head of gold. What was he talking about? The king himself or his kingdom? Both. All right. And then he said another inferior kingdom would come, and a third kingdom, and a fourth, and so on and so forth. These are undeniable facts in history. That's evidence. And Jesus said, as he's working with these men from Emmaus, he wanted their faith to be founded on undeniable facts. And you and I, as we read yesterday, and we're going to read this before we go to, because I said for some of the new people, we're going to read what we're going to be faced as Seventh-day Adventists now. This is on page 69 of the book Evangelism. What we're going to be faced. And if we don't have undeniable facts, we'll be sad and discouraged like those men on the way of Emmaus was. Here's what it says. Search the Scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life. Every position of truth taken by our people will bear the criticism of the greatest minds. And the highest of the world's great men will be brought in contact with the truth. And therefore, every position we take should be critically examined and tested by the Scriptures. Don't just accept it because Pastor Poholka said it, or Brother Mason, or Brother Davis, or any of these other brothers. Amen. Go back. Amen. Check it for yourself. Because we're going to be confronted with the world's greatest minds. And our facts had better be in a row. Because the reason that Jesus led these people back to an understanding of who he was, he used the facts of the Bible. Didn't he? Beginning at Moses. And he started all the way through and said, you know what Moses said? It said in Genesis 3:15. And then they go, what's in Genesis 3:15? And he took them through all those prophecies, and he built their faith back up again so that they had a lively hope. What do you say? Amen. And that's what the prophecy. We better understand these things. Look what goes on to say. Now we seem to be unnoticed, but this will not always be. Movements are at work to bring us to the front. 450 of Volume 5 says that the powers of darkness are making their way, and they're going to push us right to the front, as it says here. See, movements are at work to bring us to the front, and if our theories of truth can be picked apart by historians or the world's greatest men, it will be done. Now, I mentioned yesterday when this was going to be done. When was it going to be done? When we're brought into the courts to stand for our faith. Isn't that right? Now, anybody remember the O.J. Simpson trial? Anybody watch it? I watched it intently. It was probably one of the most publicized and watched court cases in the history of this nation. And we were all glued to it, remember? Now, that's going to be peanuts compared to when you and I are called, because the issues are a whole lot more at stake. We're going to be the troublemakers. We're going to be the ones, somebody's going to be brave enough to say that the mark of the beast is an enforcement of a principle by the powers of darkness. Only we're going to say who it is. We're going to say it's the Catholic Church. You know, it's kind of like uncouth to say that now. But we're going to be saying it. Did you say? And we're going to say, yes, I said it, and here's the reason why. And our doctrines, through our testimony in the courtroom, is going to be exposed to the world. That's what the Great Controversy says, 607. Many are going to hear. They're going to hear it because we're forced to tell it. That's the reason we're in jail, because we did tell it, and now we're forced to tell it again. Because they're going to try to make us look terrible because we did say it. But we're going to say it even more boldly. Yes, I did say it, but you know what I did? I forgot to tell you the whole truth. Here's some more of it. Amen. We're going to be led by the Spirit. And you talk about channeling. If you've got it in there, it's going to come off like this. Because the angel is playing the computer. And it's just coming off. The statements are going to come to your mind. Because that's what Ellen White tells us. We're going to just share things. We're going to be led by the Spirit, and things are just going to come up. But if it's not in there, he's going to hit a button and nothing comes up. We got to be ready, folks. World's greatest historian. And some of these lawyers that have been trained to destroy the witness on a stand. That's what they took their training in. But when the Spirit of God takes somebody's simple and humble and teachable, and then uses that testimony, it's going to blow those giants right out of there. Amen. And the common people that are listening out on Fox News and CNN CNN. Yes. All those, and ABS and whatever else is out there. Yeah. Listen to me. There's going to be thousands of people watching. So it's important that we know these prophecies and these truths. This goes on to say, we must individually know for ourselves what is truth and be prepared to give a reason for the hope that we have with meekness and fear, not in a proud, boasting self-sufficiency, but with the Spirit of Christ. We are nearing the time when we shall stand individually and alone to answer for our beliefs. Somebody's going to knock on your door. And by the way, it's being done now. The laws are such now that the law, remember just recently, they went into this home, and they kicked the people out and they took over that home because they thought there was terrorists in some area. Remember, you just read it in the news just a couple of months ago, and even not less than that? And they just took it over. The laws are already set up. They can come in our home and just take whatever they want, and there's not a thing we can do about it, except stand for the truth in the right spirit. Listen to me. Religious errors are multiplying and entwining themselves with satanic power about the people. There is scarcely a doctrine of the Bible that has not been denied. And we went through 4 of them yesterday, remember? Now, without looking to your notes, what were they? Creation. The fall of man. Very good. The atonement. And the perpetuity of the law of God. Yes. And we're going to have to stand for those things. Now, where are we headed now, sister? Education, page 190. That's where we left off yesterday, right? Now, 190, page education. Because remember, we looked. In fact, for those that weren't here, let's just take a quick look at page 15 to start with. Because there were some that weren't here yesterday, so we're building on what we had yesterday. 15, the book Education, it says, but by disobedience, this was forfeited. In other words, they're walking the Garden of Eden. Through sin, the divine likeness was marred and well nigh obliterated. Man's physical powers were weakened, his mental capacity was lessened, his spiritual vision was dimmed. He had become the subject of death. Yet the race was not left without hope. By infinite love and mercy, the plan of salvation had been devised. And by the way, we said yesterday, when was it devised? Before sin came in. Listen. And a life of probation was granted. Now listen to this. Listen carefully. Because you remember Elder Mason brought this out to us yesterday. To restore in man the image of his Maker, to bring him back. Now how far back are we going? to the perfection in which he was created. And we said yesterday, was Adam created perfect? Did he have any blemishes on him? Not in his mind, not on his body. He was perfect. God said it was good. When I finished with him, he was good. To the perfection in which he was created to promote the development of body, mind, and soul, that the divine purpose in his creation might be realized. And we're going to look now at page 190, and we're going to see what the divine purpose was. Now watch this. This is the object of education. What's the object of education? To restore in man the image of God. Now I'm going to pick up where I didn't pick up yesterday. When I'm in a competition, whose image am I restoring? Satan. You don't see Jesus in a football game. I don't care how many times they pray before the game, he's not in the game. So any education, and I use that way off, we can bring some things a little closer. You know, we give prizes to colporteurs and some of these things for winning, selling the most books. So why am I selling the book? To get a prize? Because that's what that engenders. Did you get that? Folks, we need to understand how cunning the devil is. See? No, we don't give prizes for that. No, we can tell people that they did, you know, especially with our children, we try to encouragement. You did a good job and you know, whatever. But when we're talking, now I'm in the book of Great Controversy, and to get back to the book of education. Folks, we need to understand what the devil is doing. Because Jesus is not in any football games, and he's not when an Adventist church gets up teams to fight with another Adventist church or another Christian church or wherever. That's the spirit of the devil in the church. Because that has nothing to do with restoring the image of God in man. And we need to understand that. And listen, if we're going to work in our churches, and then somebody say, well, we got to have this gospel, so that it's the user-friendly gospel, I'll go put on, and I'll have a game. Now, I won't fight to win, but I'll be in the game. Now, what a bunch of foolishness. Who are you fooling? You yourselves are the worst fool of all. We are not to be in that game. We don't play along to get along. We're to stand for truth. Every act, listen carefully, every word, every thought, as we're going to see in a minute in early writing, in education here later on, is determining on which side of the conflict I'm on. And so the education I get, if it's not leading me to a closer walk with God, I better be very careful with it. Are you hearing me? We better be very careful. And I don't care whether it's a Sabbath school teacher, and I don't care if it's the pastor. I will share this now. There's some churches I will not go to. I'm sorry. I cannot go to them. I will not subject my mind to some of the stuff that's coming off that pulpit. And standing up and fighting it in a congregation is not the way to do it. I've tried that. I thought it was bold one time, you know. Yeah, it don't work. And even if you're successful in sharing some things that might bring some conviction, that's not the way to do it. Remember, we have the tongue of the learned, we may know how to speak a word in season. And so we're going to talk a little later about what we do in some of those situations. I had a lady, in fact, I'll just mention this. I had a lady call me one time when I was still pastoring in New York, someplace in this district, in this area, and I don't exactly know where she was, but she said, Pastor, what am I going to do? They have puppet shows. They have the ladies on front with no clothes on, or next to none. And then they have all these other things. And she said, I am not taking my children to that church. And I said, yes, you better do it. That's God's church. You get in there. No, I didn't say that. I said to her, I wouldn't take my kids to that church either. Amen. It went pretty silent in here. I wouldn't take my children to that church. I'm sorry. And I don't care where this goes on the video or where. Hey, I wouldn't take my kids to that church. I said it. I told her, unless you have a position of leadership, unless you're on the board, unless you can work with some area, you yourself shouldn't go to that church. The testimonies tells us error is never harmless. Error is never harmless. Not offhand, but you'll be able to find it on, just use that on the finder there, and you'll find it. Error is never harmless. That's right. Of course, that's talking about the non-Adventist churches in 124 of the book, Early Writing. And even then, we got to be careful. But listen, dear one. Education, see, it was to do what? This was the object of education, to restore us back into the image of God. If you're in a situation where you're not learning how to be in harmony with God and to reflect His image, you better get out of there. I don't care if it's Andrews University.
Amen. That's right. Praise God.
This is the object of education, the great object of life. Everything we should do should have that in mind. Is this restoring the image of God in me? And if it isn't, get out of there. You know, as a pastor, a lot of people have come to me, particularly in marriage counseling, and they present some horrendous situations and want to know if they can divorce their husbands or divorce their wife. Either one. Mostly it was women usually. And I had to share with them some very interesting principles. You know that there's a statement, I was looking for it just a minute ago and I can't find it, but it will come to me, and I'll have it before the end of the meeting, that Ellen White makes this statement, and it's a very strong statement. She says, even if you know your marriage is of the devil, you're to make the best of it. That's a quote. That's an exact quote. Yeah. I thought it was on page 512 of I brought the book, but it's not there. But we'll find it. Get it on there's more. You know, nowadays we got to be careful what we say in the pulpit because you all have your little things there. What did the pastor say? Well, get it out and prove the pastor right now. Not wrong, but prove him right. But that's what it said. And I'm telling you, after hearing some of the stories that they tell, you say, how in the world could I even say that to them? Send them back into that pit. And that's why, dear ones, one of the things we're going to talk about, listen carefully, is we have to school our young people how to get married to the right person, whether it's a girl or a boy.
Amen.
And it may be old-fashioned. Listen carefully. It may be old-fashioned. And Ellen White, actually, in talking about the very subject, uses those very words. It may be old-fashioned. But it works. And if we haven't taught our ladies to be selfless in the home and taught them how to serve, they will not serve a man. And if we haven't taught them, the sons in our home, to respect their mother, they won't respect their wife. They'll use her as a machine. You know, there's an old story that goes like this. When poverty comes in the door, love goes out the window. We don't stay in homes where there's trouble anymore. Oh, he don't make me happy anymore. He said this. She said that. She burned the beans. That's it for her. Over the stupidest things, we leave each other. It's time we were committed to God and committed to... When I was married, there was several hundred people at my marriage, and I stood and said to God, to the minister, and to all those witnesses that become better or for worse, I was committed to that situation. What do we say now? Well, he's treating you bad. Get out of there. Now, there is time. Listen carefully. The other side is, there is time when there's physical abuse. We're not expecting people to stay in those kind of situations. They need to get out of them. I dealt with a situation one time where a lady came to me and said her husband was beating her, and as we went through the thing, it was getting progressive. I said, you better get out of there. And so she left the man because of that. Because I said, you know, we know for sure that if he's getting worse, finally, when your life is finished, is when it'll finally, he can't get any worse than that, but that's what it's going to end up in. It was just shortly after I had given her that counsel and she left him. He came home drunk one night and he busted the door down to get in there, and she wasn't in there, so he hung himself. And I was asked to do that funeral. And now the lady felt that if she wouldn't have left him, he'd have lived. And I had to deal with that sermon. I was standing there like this, folks. I didn't know what to say. And the mother of the boy was a Catholic, and she said, well, can't you put him in heaven? Do something for him. He doesn't have to be as high up, but get him in there somehow. I mean, this is a nonsense we have to put up with, all this foolishness. And by God's grace, we got through that. Do you have your hands up? You found the quote? Where is it? The one where air is... Yes. Did you get that? Okay, give it a test. Stand up, please, brother, and tell us the reference first. I thought it was an Adventist song. Okay, I have it here, and I can probably find a bigger writing. It is the will of God that this sister should be in a state that God... Oh, is it the will of God that this sister should be in a state and God robbed of her service? No, her marriage was a deception of the devil. Yet now she should make the best of it, treat her husband with tenderness, and make him as happy as she can without violating her conscience. Now, did you get that part? If he told her she couldn't go to church on Sabbath, or he told her, I'll just leave your imagination. For if he remains in his rebellion, this world is all the heaven that he will have. But to deprive herself of the privilege of meetings to gratify an overbearing husband, possessing the spirit of dragon, is not according to the will, to his will. And so we see there, as long as her conscience wasn't violated, when she could still go to the meetings or wherever, she was to stay in the home. Yes, the basis of it, yeah. But now I want to get more to the children, because most of these homes, when we're dealing with homes, and by the way, we are going to the book education, aren't we? We're going to get there. But I want to cover these things, dear ones. They're very important. Take your book, Patriarchs and Prophets, and read there the marriage of Isaac. There's a lot of good principles there with our young people. In Messages to Young People, there's Wildwood. You could get a hold of Wildwood. They have some forums, courtships and marriage. They have what do you call it? A pamphlet put together, and there's some good principles in there, dear ones. I took the class when I was in Eden Valley 40 years ago. And you'll want to get a hold of these principles. For instance, Ellen White tells the young lady that if a man can't control his diet, he can't control his passion. So when you're going out, this young man takes you out for dinner and he's eating three plates and he's keeping going and telling you what a kind of good guy he is, you just put on your slippers and say, can I get out of here? And get out of there. Now, I'm trying to be a little bit off, just to but listen, folks, these are serious principles we're dealing with. Our marriages are on par with the world. And some of the terriblest things, kids are being brought up, listen carefully, with no mother and no father, with no direction in their life. You see, there's one of the texts that's hard to understand in the Bible, and that is, God told them to go destroy man, woman, and child. You know why he could do that? If they had gone so far into sin, they couldn't be delivered. Now, that's hard to us to understand. But he destroyed billions of them in a flood. There were 3 billion people on the earth when he destroyed the earth by a flood. Listen carefully. And we'll be destroyed too if we don't finally grasp a hold of these principles and start walking in them. And we're responsible for our young people to educate them. Now, we can't force them. My own daughter is going with a non-Adventist. It's a very strong burden on my heart. But she's over the age of 21. And if I physically could take her, I would, but I can't do that. I'm trying to reason with her. I'm trying to get through to her, trying to share over and over again the different experiences in the Bible, how these things will finally violate your conscience and you could be destroyed. especially when you're going from truth. In my case, in my first marriage, neither of us were Christians, and I hadn't heard of Adventism before. I didn't drop my standards to get married to a non-Adventist. But when you drop your standards to get to know, you have really stuck your thumb in the eye of the Lord. We need to be very careful with that. But let's get a hold of some of these statements and then help our young people. Right since their beginning, we start to teach them that Jesus is our Lord. And we want to ask Jesus whether we should have this book or whatever, and you train the children as they come up to always ask Jesus, so that when they want a partner, it's already a part of their character to ask Jesus, whether you're a man or a woman. Ask Jesus. Talk with these little ones. Talk to them about Jesus. You know, kids are very receptive, we're told, to the story of Jesus, aren't they? Oh, yes. I took my little girl, she was 2 years old. They asked me to speak in an Adventist church up in a place called Terrace, BC, which this is down. I was talking to somebody who was in Hyder, Alaska. Was that you? Who was I talking to? Somebody I was talking about yesterday. Well, it's just in that same area. And it was a Catholic church. The Adventists were renting a Catholic church. And when you walk into a Catholic church, you know what you see? Idols. And I'm preaching a sermon, and little Crystal would say, "Daddy, idols! Idols!" Shh, Crystal. "Daddy, idols!" "Shh, Daddy, idols!" Because we had taught her that it was wrong to have idols, and she was bringing my attention. "Yes, Crystal, there's idols up there. Yeah, that's the kind I told you about. We shouldn't be worshiping them." And that's what we need to be teaching our children. There's right and there's wrong. And at 2 years old, my daughter used to, and we had them, what I used to do in evening and morning in worship, I say, now if somebody wants to tell you should take something that's not yours, what commandment are you going to use to say you can't do that? Thou shalt not steal. To teach our children to have fortification against the enemy. If you don't teach them, remember what was written on our DNA we read yesterday? What's written on our DNA? All the sins that are out there is written on our DNA. Every last one of them. You say, "Oh, that's terrible what he did." Yes, it is. And you would do it too in the right circumstance, without the Spirit of God controlling you. Okay, now we're going to go to education, page 190. All right. We read it, but we had no time. They were giving us the signal. We had to stop. Here we're going to go now. The Bible is its own expositor. And what principle did we say yesterday to help to understand that? Precept upon precept, line upon line. In other words, what we call it the proof text method. Now, the theologians of today do not use that principle anymore. That's primitive to them. In fact, they'll tell us that doesn't even apply anymore. But that's what the Bible said. Precept must be upon precept. Line upon line. All the reformers used it, and we ought to be using it. And by the way, that is a way to come to an understanding of truth, because no one text has all the truth in it. I'm going to take you to the book of Proverbs, right? Let's go to the book of Proverbs right now. We're going to share that principle with you so you can understand when you're teaching somebody how this works. We're going to go to Proverbs, the 25th chapter, and we're going to go to the 24 it is. We're going to go to the sweetest text in the Bible. This is it. This is the sweetest text you can find in the Bible. It's found in Proverbs 24, verse 13, and it says, "My son, eat thou honey, because it is good, and the honeycomb which is sweet to the taste." Is that a sweet text or what? Now, let me ask you something. Does that say you can put honey on everything? How do you know it? It doesn't say that. You don't know whether it says you can put honey on it, but a liberal-minded person will take that and says the Bible says to put honey on everything. Eat honey. There's no restriction in that text right there. None. But let's go to the next chapter, chapter 25, and we're going to read verse 27, and it says, "It's not good to eat much honey." Now, which one of those two texts are you going to use? Well, let's back up to verse 16 of the same chapter. Chapter 16, it says, "Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as sufficient for thee." Did you get that? So when you use all of those texts, you see it's all right to eat honey, but you can't eat too much and get sick, is what the text says, see? And so that's why we use what we call the proof text method, or the line upon line, so that we get a full balance of understanding. Is there some text on the state of the dead that are hard to understand? Yes. But not when what was the reference? Oh, 25:16. Proverbs 25:16. First one was 24:13, and then 25:27. The second one was 25:22. Check me, make sure. Have you got your Bible open? Check. Is that what it said? Yeah. And then the third one was 25 verse 16. And you can do that with any subject. You know that we just read yesterday. Brother Mason brought us this text. Study to show yourself approved. Right? Remember that one in Timothy? You know what Solomon says? Much study is weariness of the flesh. In Ecclesiastes 11, I believe it is. And so you've got to study, but there can be too much study. And he said, the making of books, there's no end, is what Solomon said. Remember he said that? Well, which one are you going to have? That's why we study the Bible, to get all it takes to get a rounded understanding. And we do the same with the spirit of prophecy, because you can make the spirit of prophecy say whatever you want it to say if you just pick it out of context. See? So we must study it all together. All right? Okay, so the Bible is its own what? Its own expositor, and that's how we do it. We go, if you got one text, it looks like you don't understand, go someplace else. See what Peter had to say about it, if he did say anything. See what John had to say anything, because there's some things that John said that the other disciples didn't say. See? And so on and so forth. Now let's go on. Okay, the Bible is its own expositor. Scripture is to be compared with Scripture. That's how it is. That's how it's going to be its own. We compare Scripture with Scripture. We don't just go to somebody else. No. The student should learn to view the Word as a whole. From Genesis to Revelation, it's one book. Now we say 66 books, and I understand what they're saying. But it's saying the Bible as a whole. In other words, they're all talking about the same plan. Elder Mason brought to us last night, remember this statement? That we need to understand the plan of redemption from beginning to end. I'm going to read it to you in this same statement here. See, watch what it says. The Scripture, or the student, should learn to view the Word as a whole and to see the relation of its parts. He should gain a knowledge of its grand central theme. Did you hear that last night from Elder Moses? Yes. Of God's original purpose for the world and the rise of the great controversy and the work of the redemption. So when we're studying the Bible, this is what we're looking for. We're looking to, we need to see from beginning to end. We don't just take one little book and say, well, the book of Job has nothing to do with the rest of the Bible. Is that so, after what we just read there? No. It's all one book. It's all one story. But everybody from history told it from where they were. You see, those people after the cross, the disciples, could they talk about an intelligent Jesus Christ that they knew? Yes, they could. They had felt him. They worked with him. Remember doubting Thomas. Jesus said to him, put your hand in my side and look, see, touch me. I'm real. He thought he was a spirit. See? So they had a real experience with Jesus, didn't they? They knew what he interacted like. They ate and slept with him all the time. For 3.5 years. These others just wrote about him, that they saw him in visions of what he was going to be over there. So we need both, say. And we talked about the prophecies. If you want to do an interesting study where Jesus was born. You know, there's 4 different things they said about Jesus. They said he would come out of Egypt. Did he come out of Egypt? Did he be born in Bethlehem? Didn't it say that? And go and see the other things. And he met every one of those specifications. How did he get to Egypt? Remember, that's quite a story. He had a death threat, so they left. The angel woke Joseph up and said, get out of here, he's going to die. So he did come out of Egypt. All of those prophecies are met and answered in the life of Jesus. Now let's go on. He said, see that he should gain a knowledge of a grand central theme of the original purpose for the world. Let's stop there. What was the original purpose for the world? God, well, I'm going to read it again. Maybe I read something wrong. It's possible. He said, a knowledge of its grand central theme. Grand central theme of the Scriptures, from beginning to end. What's the grand central theme, all right? Okay. He should gain a knowledge and of God's original purpose for the world. Well, that was after the fall. That wasn't the original purpose. Huh? Where did we read yesterday? We read a book called Early Writings yesterday. You got it in your notes, page 145. Okay, we're going to go back now. Listen carefully. Because we just told us that we need to learn these things, right? All right. Now, all your ideas, just hold them first, because we're going to present the Word of God. That's going to be our textbook, right? By the way, was Gabriel on holidays when he was talking to Ellen White? Now, what do I mean by that? Inspiration is at the same level. Did you get that? If Gabriel was inspired when he was taught, or Jesus, either one, when they were talking to the previous prophets, when they were talking to Ellen, is the book of Revelation a testimony of Jesus, or is it what John wrote? It's a testimony of Jesus. Well, what about the spirit of prophecy? It's a testimony of Jesus. Was Jesus less inspired when he was talking to Ellen White than he was talking to John? No. Do we have a trouble with that in the church right now? Yes. Get that through your head. Gabriel wasn't on vacation when he was talking to Ellen White. All right. Satan was, this is called Early Writings, 145. Satan was once an honored angel in heaven next to Christ. His countenance, like those of other angels, was mild and expressive of happiness. His forehead was high and broad, showing great intelligence. His form was perfect, his bearing noble and majestic. But when God said to his Son, "Let us make man in our image." All right, now man hasn't done that. There's just a blueprint. Hasn't been done yet. Satan was jealous of Jesus. Now, if you just had that statement by yourself, you wouldn't understand the controversy, but look what it says. He wished to be consulted concerning the formation of man. Why are you creating man? You see, because when he saw the blueprint, he saw something we said yesterday that he wasn't created to do. What was it? Procreation. The devil can't procreate. There is no male and female when it comes to male or to angels. What would be the need for it? Man is a new and distinct order of being. First two paragraphs in 7a of the Bible commentary. Man is a new and distinct order of being. We have the capability of being the highest created intelligence that God made. Now, you all read the book of Revelation? Yes. Now, what did I say about reading it the other day? It was yesterday morning, I think. How many times you read something before you study it? 25 times. So have you read the book of Revelation 25? At one time, I had the first 11 chapters memorized, but I've not kept up with it. But listen, and you have to read it a lot of times to memorize it. Yeah. Revelation 3, verse 21, what does it say? Or all Seventh-day Adventists should not have to turn to your Bible, but I'm going to let you do it because I want you to see it. No, that's earlier on in the chapter. To him that overcometh I will grant, listen carefully, to do what? To sit with me on my throne as I overcame. What were you created to do? You were sit on the throne of God. Kind of gives you goosebumps a little bit, doesn't it? Now, I didn't write that. Did I put that in your Bible? Your Bible, when you open it up, it says this was presented by Herbert Poholka. You don't see that in your Bible. That's what your Bible has said all along. It's never changed, has it? To him that overcometh I will grant to sit with me on my throne, as I overcame and sit on the Father's throne. You know what it said? No. You got a question? Just hang on a minute, because a thought went to my brain, and I don't want to lose it while it's there. 668, Zarb Ages. Listen to this one. Yeah, this gets powerful stuff, folks. I hope I'm rattling your settled into business. You know, we're going to forget about being settled in. It's time we got settled up a little bit, right? Okay, here's what it says. Zarb Ages 668. The Lord is disappointed when His people place a low estimate upon themselves. Now, we are nothing, and we know that because we're in a sinful state. But that was not God's original mind. When He created Adam, he wasn't nothing. He was something. All right? The Lord is disappointed when His people place a low estimate upon themselves. He desires His chosen heritage to value themselves according to the price that He has paid upon them. Let's stop and think for a minute. How many of you ever bought a new refrigerator? Anybody here bought a new refrigerator? All right. Now, what did you have to do to buy that refrigerator? You had to give some money equal to the value of the refrigerator. You gave the merchant the money, and he gave you the refrigerator. All right, now watch what this text says. I'm going to read it again. It says, He desires His chosen heart to value themselves according to the price that God has paid upon them. What are we worth? We are worth the life that Christ gave. What did He give? He died eternally. What are you worth now? Priceless. Don't let anybody tell you you're nothing. You're a child of God. And there was a big price paid that you might have salvation. And listen, if you're not worth what He paid for you, He cheated Himself. Isn't that right? Folks, we're not dealing with cookies here now, even if they're chocolate. We're dealing with the real thing. God's original purpose. I didn't write this book. He desires His chosen heritage to value themselves according to the price that He's placed upon them. God wanted them, else He would never have His Son on such an expensive errand to redeem them. Was it expensive for God to redeem us? That's what it said. And we need to see that grand central theme, it says, as the Bible from the whole. And we need to understand there was a purpose for God's creation. And don't let me forget, I'm going to great controversy after this because I haven't finished this. We've got to go to add to this. Listen to me. I hope I know where I'm going. This is interesting. It says, He has use for them. He has what? Use for them. And He is well pleased when they make the very highest demands of Him. We're His children. That's our Father in heaven, and He's well pleased. Lord, I want help to understand your word. Is He going to give it to you? No, you little brat, you haven't done anything for 20 years. That's the end of you. Would He say that? No. We're His children. He's well pleased. Well, I wonder if I should ask God for a new car. I mean, the old one, I know it's beat to death, and I know it's this, and I know it's that. And I can't get to church on time because I have always 3 flat tires before I get there. Should I ask Him for a tire or not? That's not humility, that's stupidity. Now, we talked about poverty earlier. I'm not talking about intervening with God's plan there. I'm talking about let's ask God for those things that are essential, particularly in our spiritual life. All right, let's go on. And He is well pleased when they make the very highest demands upon Him. God is pleased. Lord, I want to be like Enoch. That pleases God. And He sets things in operation so that He'll answer that prayer that you can be like Enoch. How many here want to be like Enoch? You displeased God by saying that, And He's going to set in operations to help you to get there. So you better hang on because you're going for a ride.
Amen.
He has a use for them, and He's well pleased when they make the very highest demands upon Him, that they may glorify His name. Our demands got to be in harmony with that principle. Lord, I want to do that so I can bring honor to Your name. Now, you know what He may do to get you to? He may put you on the block and say your head's going to be chopped off. And if that's what He wants, that's what He's going to get if we're submissive. Because that'll bring the high. You know, God has trained each one of us. Some of us may stand in the court, but there's many thousands of people. I believe millions are going to be persecuted before this whole thing's over with yet. And if that's our lot in life, if that's what it's going to take to bring honor to You in my particular sphere, Lord, I'm ready. The great controversy tells us that there was young men or young women that were going to be buried alive during the Dark Ages. So you know what they did? They put the best clothes they had on. They were going to die for Jesus. Very touching story. You ever read the book, Fox's Book of Martyrs? Don't try to read it in one setting, you'll die. Read it in parts. It's an amazing book. But listen, dear ones. God is well pleased, isn't He? And then it goes on. Now it's going to take you to the great controversy. And I had it here. Here it is. This, I believe, is in 584. Listen to it. It might be 484. I'll just check to make sure. We're going to carry that on. God's original purpose, right? Is this going to give you a new understanding to the way how you study your Bible now? I hope it does. There it is, 484, great controversy. And I don't even have it marked in this edition yet. Listen to what it says. Satan, in his efforts to deceive and tempt our race, had thought to frustrate the divine plan in man's creation. Remember, it bothered him when he saw the blueprints. Ooh, what is this? What are we going to bring it on the scene next? You know, Windows gets threatened when Apple makes their new computer, because then they're going to have to be better than that one. See, and that's what Satan went through when he saw the Lord make this this plan of man, and he's going to put it out there. You get threatened, see? And so it says, Satan, in his efforts to deceive and tempt our race, had thought to frustrate the divine plan in man's creation. But Christ now asks, watch this now, but Christ now asks that this plan be carried into effect as if man had never fallen. Yes, there was a detour in the plan. Man fell. We had the fallen nature yesterday. But when He's restored, we're coming back off of that. When He's restored, listen to this. Listen to this. Are you ready? He asks, He's asking the Father now. He asks for His people not only pardon and justification, full and complete, but a share in His glory and a seat upon His throne.
Amen. Praise God.
That's your destiny. And that's why the devil is working hard that you don't get there. That's why our dress, someone said to me yesterday, what's got jewelry got to do with salvation? I'm going to give you a principle for dress. This applies both to men and women. As God's people in the day of atonement, we are dressed to conceal, not to reveal. Did you get that? The self is not to be seen. Christ is to be seen. And if I look at a woman and there's very little to look at, that the skin isn't shown, I can't think of Christ. So you women are destroying my relationship with Christ when you dress like that. Now we know the story of Joseph, and there is some, and I hope to be one of them. But you make it very hard for me to be a Christian when you come on the scene with no clothes on. But if you're dressed like a lady, like all these ladies I've seen here, I can honestly say when I see you ladies, all I see is your faces. Nothing else attracts me. And I'm not saying you're dish rags or you're dressed in gunny sacks. I'm not saying that. But you're attractive when I look at you. Because you're Christian ladies. And so don't sneak into this where it's lower and lower and lower. Because as a man, you know what I see? I want to see even lower. That's my nature. And you have to help me. When it gets higher and higher and higher, you know what I want to see? I want to see it higher. That's my nature. I'm telling you how it is, folks. And we're going to be held in judgment when we've led, whether it's men or women, but we've led the opposite sex into those kind of thoughts. Read the chapter in Patriarchs and Prophets, the chapter called Apostasy at the Jordan. It got so bold that the women came in the camp. By the design of the devil, the women came right into the camp and seduced the children of God. Now, if you remember in Genesis 6, what was it about those women over there that the men back didn't like the women back home? They were fair to look upon. And I'm going to tell you something about high heels, you ladies. Listen to me carefully. High heels are very provocative for men. Now, I'm an old man, so it's not quite as provocative, but there's still things go through my head. When women wear high heels, just the nature of your body trying to compensate that protrudes your breasts further out this way. And we like it. And along with that, your buttocks stick out like this. And we like that. And it's sinful. And it makes a man... Now, when a man wears his shirt off in front of women, same thing. You don't have the same amount of temptation because we're built with hormones built in a whole lot stronger direction. Because we are to be the dominant one. For that very reason. Because we have some sick males among us. We like men better than we like women. Now that's the height of sickness. And you women aren't far behind because some women like women. That's sickness. God never designed that. And somebody better stand up and say it's wrong. Because after women's ordination, the next thing we're going to be asked to do is to accept homosexuals in our group. And we'll accept them if they're converted, but we're not accepting on any other basis. It's sick. And so, yes, our dress. Where was I? I was headed for the great controversy. Oh, that was the great controversy. And so we're going to restore. God is going to restore us, dear one. Oh, jewelry. Yes, yes. Well, the jewelry fits into the same thing. See, on the Day of Atonement, listen, in the main revivals, you know, when Jacob went back to his home, they took all their jewelry off and hid it under a tree. Wouldn't you like to find that tree? Find that jewelry? Yeah, you'd be worth something now. And then in Isaiah 3, there was a big reformation. They took the jewelry off. On the Day of Atonement, particularly on the Day of Atonement, there was nothing to bring any attention to self. When we laid our offering, when we brought our lamb, which we'll talk about on Sabbath afternoon, all sins had to be. Is selfishness a sin? Yes. Everything had to be laid upon that lamb. And when we left the sanctuary, we'll talk about it on Sabbath afternoon, we're going to leave with no sin on us. Now, I was in the book of education. Let's read this. We're getting to the good stuff now, all right? So now you know why you were created, right? You were created to sit on the throne of God. That's what you were created for. And you better figure that out. Now, if you know you were created to sit on the throne of God, how'd you better start preparing? Huh? What kind of king is up there? Is there a selfish king up there? Is there a very demanding king? No. The king that's on the throne is very, very merciful, and we better figure that out before we get there. That better be a part of our character before we get there. All right, that's enough on that. Let's go on. He's supposed to, the original purpose of the world and the rise of the great controversy. See, the whole world, and even in the church now, we're taboo in sin. We're taboo. You know what I mean by tabooing sin? What's the phrases that are being used today? Well, it's criticized if we say something about it, but what's the phrases that are being used today?
That's negative.
That's negative. Someone said something? That's the way I was born. Yeah, it's my nature. No, it's sin! And somebody better tell us that. Yes, it is my nature, and it is in my genes. That's the problem with it. And we make excuses for sin with that for it. They're saying, well, the homosexual was born that way. I was born that way too. We'll stand before God, well, that's the way I was born, so you're just going to have to accept me. What kind of foolishness is that going to when we stand before the judgment bar of God? You're going to have no weight with that one. The only weight we're going to have at the judgment bar, we're going to present Christ, both in our justification and in our sanctification. That's the only weight we have. And if we don't have that, we have nothing to present. I was born that way. That's not going to go very far with God. We've got to stop excusing sin.
Amen.
Now, where was that? It was on page 190. Let's read it on. And the rise of the great controversy and the work of redemption. Now, remember yesterday I said there's 3 stories in the Bible. What were they? Class. That was the second one. What was the first story? Creation was number 1. The fall, number 2. And what was the third story? Redemption. And all the rest from Genesis 3 on was the rest of the story. Now, I did happen to bring Patriarchs and Prophets, and I'm glad I did, because a statement comes to mind on page 77 of the book Patriarchs and Prophets. You ever read this book? Interesting book. The chapter called Cain and Abel Tested, on page 77. You see, dear ones, if we're going to work with our families, with the church on the inside and with the world on the outside, we're going to have to understand the nature of evil. I was just reading today that we need to have well-disciplined homes with our children. Let me read it to you. You know, we think we can just let our children do whatever they want to do. I had it here. Adventist home. I thought I brought it. I believe it's page 35. I believe it's page 35, Adventist home. I was sure I brought it, but I say I didn't. But anyway, I'll get to that when you find it. But let's go to this. The murder of Abel was the first example of the enmity that God had declared would exist between the serpent and the seed of the woman. Did you get that? The murder of Abel was the first example of the iniquity that God had declared would exist between the serpent and the seed of the woman. Remember Genesis 3:15? His followers, wait a minute. Let me read that again. God had declared would exist between the serpent and the seed of the woman, between Satan and his subjects, and Christ and his followers. Through man's sin, Satan had gained control of the human race. He gained what? Control of the human race. Now, yesterday I shared, and I'll share it again because there might be some confusion on this. Just recently I heard of 7 Day. Now, the Catholics have said this all the time. The Catholics have said that when you're born a sinner. And that's why they baptize you as a baby. Because if you were to die as a baby in a Catholic church and not have been baptized, you're lost eternally. And unfortunately, a man who was a theologian, and he's a good friend of mine, was teaching Sabbath school just recently, and he said, we are born sinners. And I stopped him right there in a Sabbath school lesson because I thought there was time to straighten it up right there. I said, no, wait a minute. We are not born sinners. We are born with a sinful nature. In other words, a tendency to sin. That's what we're born with. And sin is the transgression of the law. Has a baby sinned? He doesn't even know what the law is. He has to choose to sin. So we're not born sinners. But he has a tendency to sin, and as soon as he gets an opportunity, he will sin. Now, on the other hand, if the mothers, listen carefully, if the mother during her pregnancy and even before, and the father, because Ellen White tells us the propensities of the father and mother are going to be transferred to the child, particularly with morals. If we're beasts during our marriage, our children will become beasts. I don't want to get any more graphic than that. I think you probably could figure out in your fertile minds what I'm talking about. But listen to me. Our babies, some of us, are born with a whole lot harder chance to get along because of what we've done in our lives. And that's why one of the reasons that she said there should be very few children in the last days. Now listen, let's carry this a little further. Yes, I will say that because of my life and my wife's life, whatever we've done, particularly in lowering the moral, we're talking about self-abuse and some of these kind of things, and something else that goes along with that package, I won't say anything. There's too many young people here. But there are some things, we'll talk about oral sex for a minute. Those kind of things, they're absolutely, totally wrong. There's not 1 ounce. Ellen White said that abuse drains the vital forces of our brain. We now have some doctors on record that have actually scientifically approved that now. But they're against the whole, because when you go to your family doctor right now and they'll say that's good for a child to let them practice self-abuse. They actually say it's good for them. That's how corrupt this nation has become. Mankind has become so corrupt that their organs are what's leading them. We don't have any brains anymore. It's terrible. And so people that have been involved in that, when they have children, that child is already headed down a long road to that, in most cases. And that's one of the reasons I said that Ellen White said we should have fewer children in the last days. Along with the fewer marriages, we should have fewer children. Because we don't. But nonetheless, no matter what kind of heritage that child had, it still is not born a sinner. Now, it may be born with a whole lot of opportunity of not being a sinner, but it's still not born in sin. I mean, it's born in sin, because David said, the psalmist says, "In sin did my mother conceive me." We come out with a fallen human nature. Not the nature we were created in the Garden of Eden, but a nature that is now not in harmony with God. Now, by the way, Jesus had that same nature. And that's a big fight in our church. On page 48 of this book called Our High Calling. I believe it's in this book, and let me just check to make sure. 49, that's a good one. But listen to this one. It says, Christ's overcoming and obedience. And today or tomorrow we're going to get to obedience. If we ever get to it, we're just setting a foundation here, because we need to understand these things. Because remember, God's original purpose was that we would sit on His throne. And Christ now asked that this be planned. Even though the devil thwarted the plan, he got us off on a detour. We're headed back there again. But we're not getting back there without obedience. Genesis, in the first 4 verses of chapter 3, we were told we couldn't have the tree of life anymore because of what Eve did, what Adam and Eve did. Isn't that right? But when we get all the way to Revelation, the 22nd chapter, and you all shut your Bibles, don't open your Bibles, because I want to know if you're Adventists here. Verse 14. Someone quote verse 14 of chapter 22 of Revelation. That they may have right to the tree of life. Isn't that amazing? Now listen to this. The human nature of Christ. This is one of the most profound statements you're going to find on the nature of Christ in the life of Christ. Christ over being and obedience is that of a true human being. In our conclusions, we make many mistakes because of our erroneous view of the human nature of our Lord. Erroneous views. What was he like? And just listen to some of our theologians and you'll hear some of these erroneous views. When we give to his human nature a power that it is not possible for man to have in his conflict with Satan, we destroy the completeness of his humanity.
Amen.
You got that? That's one of the most complete statements. It tells me he had the same nature. Because it says, when we give to him a power that is not possible for man to have. If we say he had the pre-fall nature, that's a power that I can't have.
Right. If you could walk on water, then
Question. That's Our High Calling, page 48. 48. Yeah. Our High Calling, page 48. Question. That's exactly what we're saying. Yeah. He never sinned, because had he sinned once, now listen to me. If he'd have come in a pre-fall nature, it would have been easier for him to resist sin. Yes. See, Adam had to choose to sin. That's the nature he had, he was created with. He literally had to choose to sin. I don't have to choose to sin. I just keep walking and I can sin. I have to choose to do what's right. That's my nature. Are you hearing me? The nature that Jesus was born in is the same nature I have. He had to choose to do what is right. So his battle wasn't any easier than ours. No difference. He had the same battle to fight. Remember what Hebrews chapter 4 said? He was tempted in all points like as we are tempted. Well, could he have been tempted like I am if he didn't have my nature? I mean, it's just logical. It's just when we give to him a power that it is not possible for us to have, we have destroyed the completeness of his humanity, I just read. Now we're going to read on. His imputed grace and power he gives to all who receive him by faith. The obedience of Christ to his Father was the same obedience that is required of man. There's no more required of us than was required of Jesus. Man cannot overcome Satan's temptations without divine power to combine with his instrumentality. Jesus had the same thing. He said, I can do nothing, but my Father has to help me get, you know what? He had to pray all night to gain strength so he wouldn't sin. So with Jesus Christ, he could lay hold of the divine power. He didn't use his own power. He set that aside when he became man. But he relied on divine power, his Father's power. See? All right. He came not to our world to give the obedience of a lesser God to a greater, but as a man to obey God's holy law. And in this way, he is our example. I should forever settle this foolishness on the nature of Christ. That's page 48, the book Our High Calling. And we must run along because I have just informed that I have 4 minutes. Okay. And we're talking about Cain and Abel now. We'll have to finish off tomorrow, right? Because we're just getting started on this stuff. We haven't even finished the statement in education there. Remember now where we're going to start tomorrow? Yes, there's a class tomorrow, yes. There better be. We haven't finished these thoughts up. No, that's in the after, I think it is. That's after me. I get my position. I'm going to fight for it. I haven't finished teaching you yet. Listen to me. That's what they hired me for. I'm not going to get a check if I don't finish my job. Whenever through faith in the Lamb of God a soul renounces the service of sin, Satan's wrath is kindled. The holy life of Abel testified against Satan's claim that it was impossible for man to keep God's law. There was the first righteous man in the books of record. I didn't write that's what it said. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 77. And whenever there is any who stand in vindication of the righteousness of the law of God, the same Spirit will be manifested against them. Remember, we're going to talk about the nature of evil, and I'm going to have to cut off because let's pick that up tomorrow, okay? Pick me up tomorrow, remember, on this statement and that statement. And so now, how many have been blessed this morning because of the Word of God?
Amen.
Well, we haven't got finished that statement yet. We're going to finish it off tomorrow, if God's willing. Yes, we've got to find the one in Adventist home. But listen, dear one. Let's thank God that we were created. He had a purpose when He created us. And someday, Satan is going to, he tried to divert the plan. He tried to thwart the plan, and he did thwart it. He caused Adam and Eve to sin, and we've been sinning for 6,000 years since then. But folks, the story, the grand central theme is that we're going to have victory, and there's going to be a group, 144,000 of them, who have their Father's name in their foreheads. They're sealed to sin no more. How many want to ask Jesus? Remember, we're supposed to put the highest demands upon Him. Lord, prepare me for that moment. Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, we're thankful for your love. We're thankful, dear Lord, for these grand principles that we find in your word. For the spirit of prophecy, we have never known these things, dear Lord, unless you revealed them to us. Thank you, dear Lord. We do want to place a high demand upon you. We're kneeling before your throne, asking for new hearts, for the Spirit to cause us to walk in the ways of God. That's your promise found in Ezekiel. Lord, now that we've made this promise, we know that the devil is going to try to take it away from us. But hold us strong, dear Lord. Give us a plan and a purpose and a vision that's deeper than we've ever had before. Teach us to walk with Jesus and to reflect His image fully, is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.